Welcome, everybody, to Web and Beyond Live for this October 26th, 2020. I'm Ray Sidney Smith, president of W3 Consulting and managing director of W3C Web Services, which provides affordable web hosting and managed WordPress hosting and domain registration services and all that fun stuff for small business. And so I'm so excited to have you all here for this edition. As you all know, it is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and these past few weeks I have been going through and talking to folks and explaining things all around cybersecurity so that you can all stay more cyber resilient. And today I am just really excited. We're gonna cover all kinds of fun things about how to really use cybersecurity as a function for being more cyber resilient, but really using it as a business competitive advantage. Many of us don't think about cybersecurity from that perspective. It's all fear-based, response-based, reactionary stuff. And what I really want to do today is really talk about this from a more proactive perspective and really thinking about this as a pro as opposed to how to mitigate risk and reaction. And to do that today, I have with me Vince Crisler. He is the CEO of Dark-Cubed. It is a SaaS tool, and he's going to explain it more. I cannot possibly do it justice, but Vince himself is a cybersecurity expert with more than 20 years of information technology and cybersecurity leadership in government and private sector roles. And so with that, I'm going to bring Vince on. Hi, Vince. How's it going?
Great, Ray. How are you?
Good, good. So I cannot possibly do your CV justice. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this point of being the proprietor, but also the brain genius behind Dark-Cubed?
Well, thank you for that. I like this focus, this overlap of small business and cybersecurity. I've always been very entrepreneurial. Started my first company in high school doing some web design, and I remember getting hired to do this web design for this company in New Jersey. And so as a high schooler driving to New Jersey to talk with a customer is pretty cool. I got into the kind of security and IT pretty early. A woman in my town who was also very entrepreneurial decided to start the first internet service provider in Southeastern Ohio. And she hired me as her system admin, tech support, web design, everything else. And so I've been hooked ever since. I've been very fortunate in my career to have some really cool opportunities. The first part of my career was active duty Air Force. I was a communications officer, got to go to Germany for 3 years, work on some pretty cool missions there. Following Germany, I was sent to the Pentagon, where I got to work in the National Military Command Center in the White House, or National Military Command Center in the Pentagon. Following the Pentagon, I went to the White House Communications Agency, where I got to travel as a presidential communications officer on the road with the president. And then from there, I was loaned as an active duty officer to the White House to be the chief information security officer for the unclassified networks, which was a great eye-opening experience, a chance to secure one of the most heavily targeted networks in the world, and lock things down and protect things. Following the White House time, I had an opportunity to go over to the Department of Homeland Security and work on some of their national cybersecurity missions. How do you protect the federal government and critical infrastructure from nation-state threats? It was just a really cool mission. Amazing people there. And it was actually during that experience that I kind of started to come up with the foundational ideas for Dark-Cubed. I kind of had these themes of, cybersecurity is too expensive, too complex. There's got to be a better way. Most small businesses are left out. If you look at, it's a very crowded, noisy cybersecurity market, a lot of marketing, a lot of advertising. But I like to say 99% of the companies out there can't afford cybersecurity the way it's being delivered today. And I kind of had a passion to change that. And so I started my own company, focused on small and mid-sized companies and how do you rethink the way you deliver cybersecurity? How do you make it accessible to small and mid-sized companies? And, one of the things that I really enjoy is talking to folks, education, talking, how do you take this complex topic that everybody likes to fearmonger around and make it accessible to small business owners?
Fantastic. Thank you. And this is, as you were all noting, why I have Vince here today. I think this is just such a prescient and important aspect of all of our world. And so what I've done is I've broken this down for you all, and we're getting lots of chats in the messages with people with wow faces for you. So thank you to everybody who's engaging. And if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the, we have multiple tools where people are watching. So those who are watching from the webinar chat, you have your Q&A panel. You can feel free to throw questions in there for Vince as we make our way through our time together. But just to start out here, I thought we would kind of bucket this into three different areas where competitive advantage can be utilized. First up is productivity, and in that space where business productivity can be conditioned, and then we can talk about public relations and marketing, and then we can close out with kind of employee issues, which can be attraction, retention, and engagement. And so, just like starting right off at the bat, let's talk about profitability and how productivity can be garnered from that. And so I wanted to start off with the kind of the toughest question up front, which is what do you say to the SMB owner, to the small business owner who says, you know what, I can save money by not investing it in cybersecurity. We're not really at risk. And what do we do for those folks? What's the best argument for the pro side, not the yeah, you're at risk, you're going to be attacked, you're already being attacked, all of those things. What's the argument for cybersecurity in the positive sense?
Well, there are a couple of answers. One is you may be absolutely right. There may be no reason you need to invest in cybersecurity at all. But as a business owner, you may not be an expert in technology. You may not be an expert in cybersecurity. And when you hear cybersecurity, people on the news and other places say there's only two types of businesses: those have been hacked and those that don't know they have, right? That's all fear mongering. And what business owners are really good at intuitively, whether you realize it or not, is risk management. So when you think about operating your business, you have customers, you have products and services that you have to deliver, and you manage risks all day, every day, in terms of supply chain, in terms of how you're advertising, how you're marketing, how you're budgeting, how you're planning. And so pitching cybersecurity as a risk management discussion lets you make an informed decision. So, do you have financial records? Do you process payments? Do you have healthcare records? Do you have sensitive information, personally identifiable information, which is a lot of times name, social security number, date of birth? Do you interact with these sorts of data as a part of your day-to-day job? And if the answer is yes, then you have compliance risk, right? If that data gets out, it could cost you money. It could cost you legal issues. And so you need to think about ways to manage that risk. Do you have intellectual property? Do you have something that makes your business special, that if that information got released publicly, it would impact your business? And if so, you need to think about ways to protect that. And there are lots of ways, and there are cyber things that can get that information out. And so rather than trying to sell on fear mongering, I like to kind of have that discussion with small business owners around what matters to your business. And if you're touching nothing sensitive, if there's no compliance information at all, and you run all of your stuff off of one account and you have two-factor setup, then maybe you don't need to spend on security, but maybe you do.
Yeah, and I always put it from the perspective that I'm teaching digital marketing and productivity so often, and what I try to explain to people is that business data-driven business decisions are always going to be more powerful than ones done in the darkness.
Yeah.
People always ask me, well, who's my target audience? I don't know who my target audience is. And I always say, well, what does the data say? Are you collecting the right data to be able to get the right answers? And cybersecurity, good cybersecurity practices gives you more data. It gives you more ability to make those kinds of competitive analyses. And so why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you make those right best calls for the business from a data driven perspective? And so I love that. This leads us right into kind of my next question here, which is that I was recently reading somewhere, I forget, online, about how insurance companies are doing Shodan scans. And for everyone's edification, if you don't know what Shodan is, if you go to shodan.io, it's a tool that will allow you to basically look for various types of services and ports on systems. Basically, it can look at the open web and see what is available in that space. And it can be very eye-opening. Go to monitor.shodan.io and you can actually see various parts of your own network that can be that is publicly available and potentially susceptible online to risk. But anyway, these insurance companies are doing Shodan scans before issuing insurance policies, and so like before issuing insurance quotes and policies. And I'm curious, how can business owners kind of take advantage of this? What's kind of the advantage to them in that side?
Yeah, this is a good, complicated question. Insurance, this from other parts of your business, is about transferring risk to a third party. So there's D&O insurance, there's car insurance, there's health insurance, and there's cyber insurance. And so, if you're one of those companies that's impacted by compliance issues, if you have data that could, cause significant financial harm to your company, if that data were breached, then you need to be asking questions about, can you transfer that risk to an insurance company? And what the insurance company then is going to say is, what sort of risk do you present as a company? And they're going to look at things like, what is your revenue? How many records do you have? Do you have 1,000 medical records, or do you have 1 million medical records? Do you have PCI data, payment card information data? And so as a part of that risk discussion with your insurance company, a lot of times what they're trying to do to accelerate the writing process of getting you a policy is they're going to say, what external risk factors exist about your business? And that's where Shodan comes into play. If your infrastructure is heavily exposed and you're not locked down, then they're going to be able to see it. And they're actually using tools like BitSight and Security Scorecard, which wrap this stuff up in even at a higher level. And so as a company, if you're thinking of pursuing cyber insurance, you need to understand how they're going to price those policies. So if you create a bigger risk, it's going to cost you more. So you can take advantage of this process by understanding what they're looking at. So do a scan on your company and see what shows up. Things like your email infrastructure, these are really important. There are these terms get pretty technical, and if you have an IT department, have them help you. If you have a managed service provider, they should already answer this for you. But things like SPF records and DKIM, how do you authenticate your mail server that the mail is coming from you? Those are things that insurance companies will look at and could change the price of your premium. And they're easy things to fix. And so, thinking about what are the ways you're exposed externally on the internet, and how do you reduce that exposure?
Yeah, and like you just noted, SPF and DMARC and DKIM, all of those email policies that you set up are also good for email deliverability. So,
Right.
the better you set yourself up, the better you can get your marketing messages out to people. Remember that when you set up your email tools, you need to make sure that email is deliverable between one-to-one communications, but also in your email marketing service provider tools, so that they
Yep.
also have those right policies set up. And those are things that are exposed as you are going through these insurance quotes and
Absolutely.
insurance policy provisionings. So I think that's really, really exciting now, I think, because it actually helps to go ahead and have the insurance companies know as much as they do. I mean, there's always a sense of culpability there, right? Because the more insurance companies know, the more they can deny you or terminate a policy or deny a claim. Having been both an insurance producer in the past. I've been licensed as an insurance producer in a very narrow field of real estate title insurance. But having been an insurance producer before, as well as having worked in a litigation sense against large insurance companies, I've been on both sides of this, knowing what it's like to be able to do it. But what I've always understood is that the more you know, as you said, Vince, about insurance and the process, the better your business is going to be, because you're
Yep.
going to know both the risk, but also the possibilities to work through the system to get better at the end of the day. And just not talking about insurance issues, but also in the compliance space, I wanted to talk a little bit about, there are new laws coming up on the books all the time. We've seen several just in the last 2 years crop up in the United States, but we're seeing more and more compliance issues. We have data breach notification laws, we have data privacy and rights laws that are not yet codified on the federal level, but certainly state by state now, with California being kind of the strongest one, recently releasing these kinds of data protection pieces, and then we have data protection laws just generally that are on the books. What do you feel like is kind of the area where businesses can grow best in these processes from a real productivity perspective? What can they do? I know I have my own thoughts, but I'm curious what yours are.
Well, there are a couple of pieces to this discussion. One is, as a security practitioner, I think it's clear to articulate that compliance and security are not equal. Because you're compliant does not mean you're secure. Because you're secure does not mean you're compliant. And so as a business owner, you need to treat these as separate but related buckets of activity. With respect to compliance, you mentioned there is no national standard on data privacy, data breach notification, in compliance. And so, if you're a small business that works in one state, you should understand the laws and requirements of your state and how your attorney general thinks about these problems. And there are a lot of great resources on the internet kind of around data compliance and data breach privacy laws. If you operate in multiple states, it becomes very difficult, because you have to understand the nuances of those laws in every state. And we work with healthcare companies that operate in 30 or 40 different states, and to think about managing 30 or 40 different sets of rules, and what one state may consider a breach, another might not. What the reporting process could be different in one state to another, and so there's a work in there. And the first piece of that discussion is to understand what part of your business touches compliance, right? And again, if you're healthcare, it's pretty easy. If you're financial services, it's pretty easy. If you do your own internal health, your own internal management for your employees, you may have a lot of data that's PII data on your systems that could be affected by compliance. And we've seen plenty of great examples where an HR person will have all the records for their company on a laptop. That laptop gets stolen. Well, you have to report that to the state because that's a loss. And so, how do you manage that risk? Things like encryption certainly help. Yeah, and I guess the other thing is looking at kind of where we're headed. And you look at what's happening in Europe with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And that's a model of how to start to think about requiring data protection. It's this model that this sensitive data belongs to you as an individual, and companies have access to it, but they have to manage that appropriately. And so as we see as that gets pushed to the United States, you mentioned California with their Consumer Privacy Act, the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. That's kind of the most forward-leaning, and I expect more states to start following suit.
Agreed.
And there are certainly a lot of industry groups that are trying to push for this idea of a national law that codifies and unifies all of these approaches to make it easier on small and medium businesses.
Yeah, we have the Uniform Commercial Code, we have the Uniform Trust Code, we have all of these various uniform codes, and they're always, mildly changed here or there between states. And I think it's about time that businesses have really, it's less regulatory hurdle when you can have a centralized, code to work from. And so if any of you are watching, go out there and lobby your representatives to support. There are several bills in Congress right now that are focused on this and support a bill. It doesn't matter what the law says as long as it is one that you have to comply by, as opposed to many. And I'm being somewhat facetious there. I will note for folks, if you're looking, I did create a cybersecurity resources library. If you go to W3C Inc., W3CINC.com, over resources, drop down, you'll see a cybersecurity small business resources library. And there on the site, you can sign up and access it. It has access to all of the current data breach notification laws. I kind of, tried to put them all together in one space for you all. So you can go ahead and check that out. And so moving right along then, you started to touch on this and I know that breaking this into 3 different sections is really tough because they kind of meld into one another. But I wanted to make our way into public relations and marketing, and that's the space I spend in the most. So I'll try to keep my comments limited. But the idea here is that we have an immense opportunity, I think, in the cybersecurity space. And I'm not a cybersecurity practitioner. I'm on the outside. I'm a super geek, so I just love knowing all these things about cybersecurity. But it makes so much sense because people are doing marketing. They say, "Oh my gosh, my Twitter account has been hacked into." I get all of those questions. My website's been hacked into, and being in the web hosting space, we get a lot of discussion about that. I'm curious, how can small businesses use cybersecurity practices, good cyber hygiene, to increase their audience? How can they use it from a marketing perspective?
So branding and marketing is all about establishing you and your company in the marketplace, right? So what do you stand for? How do customers think about you? And if you're a dry cleaner or an accounting firm, there are certain messages you want to include in that marketing in terms of how you think about protecting your customers. You mentioned a lot of these tools and getting hacked. I worked a hack where this group got their Facebook account hacked. It got taken over by some actors that started to put horrible messaging up on their site, pictures that they couldn't take down. It was just disgusting, and it all came because they didn't have 2-factor authentication in place. And so I'm going to take a moment here to kind of push like my number one rule in cybersecurity. It's not foolproof, but if you're doing whether it's your email or your digital marketing or any of these platforms, turn on 2-factor authentication. Because having somebody steal your password is a pretty easy task from an attacker perspective. And so get 2-factor authentication turned on. make sure that on platforms like Facebook, you have delegates set up that if something happens, they can actually get in and lock that account down for you. It is really difficult once the breach or that compromise happens on a platform like Facebook or Twitter to get it back. It takes a while. There's not a streamlined, easy process. So going back to your original question around kind of increasing your audience using cybersecurity, I think a lot of it depends on, what type of business you are. If you're an accounting firm, you have access to a lot of small businesses that are facing threats, things like business email compromise. We see it in the news all the time where, the person in finance and accounting gets an email from their CEO that says, hey, I need you to transfer, $100,000 to this account, and they do it. And that money's gone. And that small business is impacted significantly and may even go out of business. And so, if you have customers that are in the small business world, taking a moment out to educate and train them and get them resources just builds a better relationship between you and your customers. It also shows kind of that you're being responsible. And there are so many resources out there from a training and education perspective that delivering this to your customers is pretty easy these days. So think about ways to kind of establish your brand and reputation there. So that's kind of my key focus.
Absolutely. I mean, all of you watching or listening, don't you like me more because I'm helping you be more cyber secure? No, but it's a reality factor, right? And in this age of COVID-19 and the pandemic, safety and affordability are the two primary marketing messages that really work well for good reason and good both ethical and probably moral reasons. But what we see here is that if we can push a message of safety across the board and say, we're not just being safe because of this public health crisis, we're being safe across the board. Physical security, digital security, as well as your health and safety, as well as the health and safety of our employees when we get to talking about that. All of these pieces blend into both the brand messaging, the ongoing messaging of the company, and word gets out. I mean, word is, spreads really quickly among people when you're doing the right things and when you're doing the wrong things. And just staying on the side of the right things, I think it's just so powerful when you can do the right things and have that message be heard by your audience. So I really, really recognize that we can put together some light touch mechanisms for being able to get the messaging out. And if you all have questions about that, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about what good messaging you can do related to how you are keeping your customers' data, your vendors' data, all of the various stakeholders' data safe and secure, and how that can actually help you actually grow trust and credibility across the board. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit. So I wanted to see if you had any examples of innovations in companies that were spurred on by cybersecurity. And I'm thinking of, in your work and time in cybersecurity, you must have seen something where people started off thinking, okay, we've got to create a more cybersecurity friendly environment here. We have to lock down the system because of X, and it actually maybe birthed a new product or birthed a new service line, or the division or department made a fundamental change that was really positive on the other side. Any examples that you have for us that you can think of?
Yeah, so I think taking a stand on the security side is important. Things like if you've heard of Twilio as a platform, they do a lot of messaging pushing. They're basically a telco in the cloud where you can do phone, you can do texting, all sorts of automation. They've taken a stand to basically make two-factor authentication required. And steps like that I think industry will catch up. It's a no-brainer that two-factor is going to be required at some point soon. But taking a stand on some of these security issues because you're looking out for your customers, just gets you noticed. And you kind of have this idea that any press is good press, and maybe not in a breach, but ways to get noticed as a business to say, look, we care about our customers so much that we're going to take these extra steps to make things more secure, and we're going to push information out. And we certainly see, and we're working with organizations. There's a very large insurance company in the U.S. called Gallagher Insurance that we're working with, where we're collaborating with them to deliver more affordable security to their customers. And so that's an example where they're finding partners in the space to complement them to deliver better products and services to their customers. And so these are all ways that you can build your brand and build messaging and get folks more secure at the same time.
Yeah, I've seen definitely in this age of the pandemic spur innovation like I've never seen before in 25 years of watching small businesses develop and grow. And what I have learned in this time frame is that necessity is a great driver, and what businesses can do in this point in time is while you're already doing all of this work to become more digitally aware and building your digital presence, if you just add a little bit of cybersecurity in there, you will find that there are things that because of the limitations, right? We always talk about in the cybersecurity space, at least always talks about the trade-off of security and convenience, right? If you can really make your product more convenient in the face of more security, then you really have a true competitive advantage. Thinking about curbside delivery and local delivery and things in which otherwise would be just a necessitating factor. If you can think about how you are doing that in such a way that actually protects client data and you can message that appropriately, that can actually be really, really powerful for people in a lot of ways. So I'm really bullish on that whole concept of pushing that message.
Completely agree.
Okay, moving right along to building trust and brand strength, because it's an area that I spend a lot of time with clients working on through the economic development agencies that I work for, and so on and so forth. And I always wonder how do small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, really communicate cybersecurity to past, present, and potential customers so that they can build greater trust and brand strength? What is being on the inside, watching how people lose trust and lose credibility very quickly in that
Yeah.
space. What's the flip side message to that? How do you put that on the other side so that businesses can communicate? Again, like I said, in those three kind of time zones of past, present, and potential, how do they communicate to those folks in such a way that's positive?
Yeah, and again, going back to this whole idea of risk management and managing your company and your brand and your reputation and the trust of those past, current, and future employee or future customers. I think one thing that's really important is while I kind of badmouth fear mongering a little bit early on. I think there also has to be a realistic expectation that something's going to happen to your business at some point, right? And so hopefully it's not ransomware, but it could be a phishing attack. What if your email account gets compromised and a nasty message goes out to all of your customers? So thinking as a leadership group, and whether it's one or two of you or five of you in your business, thinking through what are those scenarios that would cause your business harm. So what happened if what happened if all of your systems got locked down and somebody was asking you to pay $20,000 to get it back or more, right? And I think the average ransom right now is around $100,000, $80,000 to $100,000. What would you do as a company if you had a data breach? How would you communicate to your customers? How would you react? And I think in some ways this is the unforgotten piece: is how do you do branding and marketing and PR after a breach? And if you're not prepared for that before the breach, you're going to be playing catch up, and that's not where you want to be playing catch up in a bad situation like a data breach. So I would strongly encourage that you think about can you do that internally? Do you have the right marketing folks? Do you have the right PR folks internally to support that messaging? And what does that messaging look like? Start writing it now, because that'll get you thinking about what those risks look like. If you don't have that internal support, who do you reach out to for that support? What are the groups in your area that understand PR and marketing and legal support for cybersecurity breaches? And you don't have to spend money, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time. You just have to identify those resources and say, hey, do you guys do, or do you guys know of somebody that does marketing after a data breach? Get introduced to them, understand. The other thing I like to recommend is, there's this whole term of tabletop exercises, and they can be very complicated. But it can also be writing down 3 questions that you're going to sit down. I normally would say over a bag lunch. Now I'd say over a Zoom or a WebEx, and just ask your team a couple of questions. If question 1, we got a ransomware attack that locked all of our laptops. Is that a problem or not? Right? Do we have a backup? Yeah, and we're backing up every night. Oh, do we realize that if we're backing up every night, all of those backups are probably encrypted as well? Do we have an offline backup somewhere? No. Okay, let's make an offline backup, right? So just a couple of simple questions can make the difference between your business going under and your business being able to fight through and survive. Having the right PR and marketing support set up ahead of time can be the difference between a very, very rough experience and a positive experience where you're able to communicate to your customers that if this happens to a lot of businesses, we were ready. This is how we're protecting you and taking care of you. And again, that's the difference between losing your company and not in a lot of situations.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't think fear mongering is necessary to understand that it is a when, not if proposition when it comes to cybersecurity attacks.
Yeah.
We are all under attack, and that is because we are low-hanging fruit and easily susceptible, right? You know, I said this actually last week, and I'll repeat myself because this is so important. There are people whose job it is to show up every day and attack you, right? While you are out there showing up every day to serve your community through your small business products and services, there is some poor schlub who shows up every day in some large server farm in some other country who sits down and says, okay, how do I break into your business today? You know, they're probably given a list of IP addresses, a list of business names, and they get to just go look for low-hanging fruit. And so it's really important for us to think not about the, oh my God part of this, right? There's this fanfare that's around it. Forget all that. Forget the fear-mongering. Just understand this is a risk. You are under attack. How do you deal with that attack? And just by virtue of doing that, you can go out there and say to your past customers, we are protecting your data, and this is how we're doing it. Going to your current customers and saying, you know what, we have to implement these kinds of practices because we want to make sure that while we're working with you, we're not susceptible to this attack that's ongoing. And then to future customers, you can say, if you do business with me, I'm going to do my best to make sure that you're secure. And does that mean that, like me, once in a while, maybe more than once in a while, people send me email and I don't get it because it's been quarantined and I don't check my quarantine email as often as I probably should? You know, okay, that's fine. But what I do tell them is when I do finally excise that email from wherever it came from, I can say, you know what, that was in pursuit of making sure that we stayed more secure. And by the way, you don't have DKIM or DMARC or SPF applied on your systems, and that will make you better by doing so, and it becomes an educational moment. So I just really think across the board, people feel more trusting, and your brand benefits from that trust by virtue of communicating on a regular basis that you're thinking about them. It's not just about you, right? It's about them when it comes to that kind of thing. And talking about the them, in kind of a transition to employees, many times in small businesses, you know, I deal with a lot of micropreneurs, a lot of solopreneurs, and then, you know, kind of smaller than 10, maybe sometimes smaller than 25 employee-owned businesses. And when it comes to that perspective, there are kind of two umbrellas here, right? There are the businesses that choose to, you know, basically fear and shame, you know, the fear and shame part of if you do this, you're going to ruin our business, right? So they make sure their employees are scared to death of technology generally, when employees generally are not the most tech savvy people in the first place. They're just everyday people, you know, go to work and they want to do their job, and technology is a part of it. But it's not like, you know, they're out caring about the latest iPhone or the latest, you know, Google Pixel device. You know, they're just, you know, average people. And then once in a while, there's a cybersecurity event and someone is made an example of. We go out there and we say, oh, you know, Jane, you did this and you're going to be fired for doing this. And I'm just really curious from your experience, how can businesses flip the script on that? How can they support people more to be able to make sure they benefit from cybersecurity practices, and even when incidents happen, right? Like when a mistake happens, how can businesses kind of do differently, be better, as they say?
I love it. It's a great question. You know, there are a couple of things. I think one, you know, nobody goes to work saying, you know, well, not nobody, but most people do not go to work saying, I want to find a way to screw over my company, right? I want to find a way to open every bad email and get computers infected and cause problems. You know, people generally, the non-disgruntled ones, generally want to do good for their company and support their company. And so with that in mind, it's up to the company to be responsible to give those employees the tools to be responsible and to be helpful. And you know, the thing that always frustrates me as a security practitioner when I'm talking with companies is when you let the security team go too far to the extreme of security, what it does is it prevents people from doing their job. And people just want to do their job. They want to do what's right. And they're going to find a way to do it, whether you let them or not. And if you have things locked down to the point that they can't even do some basic job functions, they're going to go around you. And that could result in a breach or a compromise as a result. And it's not because they're trying to do harm. It's because they're just trying to take care of a customer or take care of a client or take care of a business partner. And so, one is getting in the mindset of security as a collaboration with business, right? And security is an enabler. It's to make sure that you're managing the risk of your company, you're managing the integrity of the information, you're keeping that information private that needs to be held private. The other thing I'd say here is, none of us except for some people that really like pain and suffering, none of us like to sit through CBTs, like computer-based training on security. And to say that your company forces you to sit through an hour of computer-based training that's exactly the same every year and you're going to click through, that's not fun. It's not educational. And so being creative about ways to train and educate, thinking about a continuous training environment where you're getting your company into a cycle where every other week or once a month you're kind of introducing topics as part of a longer term program is really helpful. And one of the things I really like to do is, especially when you look at the small end of business, is you've got people working on their own laptops, their own computers, they're working from home, they're working from coffee shops, maybe not anymore, but someday we will work from coffee shops again. And they're just trying to do their job. And so how do you think about a culture of security in a small business where you don't have a chief information security officer and a security operations center? And from that context, where I like to get people is, how do you educate your kids? How do you educate your parents? So if you reach out to your employees with resources that say, hey, here are some really great cybersecurity tips that you can talk to your kids about. Here are some great cybersecurity resources that you can take to your parents, because the elderly population tends to be more targeted with scams, these computer tech support scams and other things that are hitting them and causing significant financial harm and pain and suffering. And so here are ways that you can train those folks. And I've seen employees latch onto that because everybody likes to train and help other people. Nobody likes to be trained. And getting your employees resources to take care of their kids and train their kids, they're going to learn more from doing that than they ever would from getting a lecture from your company. So finding ways to partner and be more creative about spreading the message in the company is really important, especially down market.
That is a fantastic idea, and I am going to steal it because I really love the idea of having them help others. That's a really great, way to demonstrate cybersecurity practices. In that vein, kind of nice segue here, which is that for many small businesses, as I said before, I deal with a lot of micropreneurs and a lot of small enterprises, and many times the staff are small. They're family members, right? Whether the business is family owned or not, it's sometimes many times a family business because a spouse or a partner is entrenched in dealing with things. Maybe they're the other admin on the Facebook page. That just happens. It's just a virtue of being small and not having enough people to go around. And I'm curious, from investors, vendors, and other stakeholders, how can we make the entire company think of cybersecurity as a competitive advantage in terms of strategy? What are some things that you can, in terms of high level, talk to people about to get them on board in terms of, okay, we're gonna adopt cybersecurity as a competitive advantage X?
Yeah, the easiest path to this discussion is talking about the financial impact, right? The fact that a breach or a compromise could cost us $100,000, and with the margins that we have, that could put us out of business. So getting people to understand that there is true financial harm. And you talk to the poor schlep at the server farm. A lot of times these guys are making tons of money. It's a great job. Hacking small businesses, you can make a ton of money really fast, and they're not just targeting you. I mean, there's a misconception that there's a hacker that's targeting your restaurant or your law firm. Typically that's not the case, because that doesn't make sense financially. What they're doing is they're hitting 5,000 companies with the same email and hoping for one or two hits. And when they get a hit, they have a fully automated process they go off on to take advantage of that hit. And so understanding that it's kind of an asymmetric threat where these folks are targeting a ton of companies and you're just going to be collateral damage because they can make money off of you. When you think about the compliance world, if you're in a business that has some compliance concerns, I think this is another place where it's more obvious to have a competitive advantage, where you can message your security, your approach, tie that into your brand. It makes a huge difference. There are programs emerging right now, such as the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification within the Department of Defense, CMMC. There's a chance that that can apply to up to 300,000 companies that are in kind of the umbrella of the defense industrial base that are doing business with the Department of Defense. Those requirements are going to flow through the very large contractors all the way down to the very small companies.
And just so people are aware, that means that if you are, and I know a lot of you who are watching are in the 8A space, that may mean that might apply to you, even though you may not think about it. So
exactly. And so, paying attention to CMMC, and it's pretty, there's a lot of noise and information out there, but from a competitive advantage, I would say, if you actually look at the security controls that are built into CMMC, and it looks big and complex, but if you actually read through it, it's not all that complicated. They're things you should be doing anyways. And so people are getting caught up in the news about, will CMMC actually work or not? Will it fall apart? Who knows? To me, what I would say, and I'm working with companies that are going down this path right now, is regardless of whether CMMC goes forward, there is value in terms of thinking about security from that model if you want to do business with the government. Right now, it's Department of Defense focused, but if you're working with Treasury or FAA or Homeland Security or any of these other groups, this stuff is coming down the road at some point. And so it's a competitive advantage for you to get ahead of that. So if CMMC comes through and you can say, look, level 3 is kind of the middle of CMMC, and we are already CMMC level 3 compliant, that gives you a leg up in those contracting discussions. It makes you look more proactive as opposed to those companies that may try to slam it at the last minute to be able to get into a contract that they want to get into. So from the compliance side, certainly thinking about trends and patterns and where these things are going and how you're aligning your business can be a huge competitive advantage. And the final thing I'd say here is, when we're looking at this world of COVID and kind of the lockdowns that have happened, a lot of businesses and functions are moving online that were never online. A lot of restaurants, a lot of other organizations are putting services and capability online that weren't there before because it's essential to do your business. And integrating services like Stripe and other services that handle the payment stuff for you gets rid of that regulatory burden in a lot of ways. And so, thinking about how you deploy those technologies is really important. And it not only is going to streamline your business, but it's going to help you from a compliance and regulation perspective, and it'll make you more competitive in the market.
Yeah, I remember when the GLBA came out. This is back in before the year 2000. For those of you who are watching who may be younger, but 1999, the Graham-Bleach-Lively Act was a financial institution-based, bipartisan legislation. But of course, it was only relegated to financial institutions. Those who touch the financial services space. And I said at that point, if you follow the GLBA, you're going to be better off in business, not just now, but 5, 10, and 20 years from now. And here we are on the cusp of those who are in California now are basically applying the GLBA to their businesses. So really listen to what Vince is saying here, because this is coming down the pike. It's going to touch more businesses than you think. And to be quite honest, it's the right ethical thing to do for your business, for your customers, and across the board. But it's also going to be ultimately good for your business because you're going to save yourself the productivity hit, right? The downtime and potentially the loss of business and the loss of your business at some point if that's the case. So it all kind of works itself out in the long run in terms of the good and the other side. I wanted to just ask you, Vince, if there's anything I missed. Was there anything here in terms of competitive advantage that you think of that may have been a missing element in kind of these 3 buckets of productivity, public relations and marketing, and then employee attraction, retention, and engagement?
I think we covered a lot of ground here. It's been great, Ray. I think, I just want to reinforce this 2-factor authentication. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go on Google and look at it. Your personal accounts, your company accounts should have 2-factor authentication turned on. If your financial institution doesn't support 2-factor authentication through their website, look at a different financial institution. If you're using a managed service provider that doesn't use 2-factor authentication on some of their management platforms, you should look at a different managed service provider. It is, again, it's not, there are ways to defeat it, but it makes the job a lot harder for an attacker. And so, I just think, what are the basics? And this is where I get to a lot of the resources. And Ray, you talked about some of the resources you have available on our on our website, darkcube.com. We actually have a cybersecurity resources page So you go to darkcube.com resources, and there's a whole page of information available. And we put that up there. There's no benefit to us other than making it available for you all to do your jobs better. So really pay attention to kind of those quick and easy things you can do to lock down and secure your business and protect your customers, protect your employees, and protect your business and your livelihood.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up on screen this site at twofactorauth.org is what Vince was talking about in terms of the capability of you being able to go in and determine whether or not your financial services agency, institution or otherwise has it. You can see there's banking here, and there's all kinds of other financial and legal sites here. And you can just type the name in and see whether or not and how to set up either 2FA, two-factor authentication, or multi-factor authentication on your service. So just know that exists and it's out there.
Yep.
And really, really helpful for being able to do that. That being the case, Vince, I wanted to just give a few minutes to you to kind of explain to folks what Dark-Cubed does, how it works, and how it can help small businesses who are really in that space of interested in becoming more cyber aware and cyber secure in this kind of age of digital retail experience.
Yeah, so we're a cybersecurity software as a service company. We are focused on simplifying the ability to detect when bad things are happening and stop it. We primarily partner with managed service providers, and those managed service providers are supporting small and mid-sized companies. They're managing their firewalls, they're managing their desktops and laptops, and making sure that you can do your job. And then we also work with small and mid-sized companies that do their own IT infrastructure. And when I look at kind of the landscape of cybersecurity, the foundational requirement, if you have a network and you have computers on that network, is you should probably have a firewall of some sort. And that firewall is kind of a gate to allow the good traffic through and the bad traffic, to stop the bad traffic. But a lot of times these firewalls require a lot of sophistication and expertise to manage. And it's really hard to do the job really well with just a firewall. When you go up market, you hear terms like security operation centers and threat intelligence and analysts and all of these functionality that, if a firewall is sufficient, you wouldn't need all these other things. But as you go up market, you find folks need to invest in that because it's a necessary step. So what do you do about the gap? What do you do about all those companies that can afford a firewall or should put a firewall in place, and those people that can afford a security operations center and analysts and all the time, energy, and money that takes? And that's where we fit in, is to say, a lot of the functionality that a security operations center performs can be taken care of by automation, can be taken care of by analytics, can be taken care of by a creative solution like Dark-Cubed. And so we integrate into your firewall. There's no hardware or software to deploy. In a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, we can be up and running. We can detect, we can look at what's coming in and out of your network. We can detect the bad stuff. We can block it and help you move on. We can do nice reporting and analytics around it. So it's been really neat to see kind of fitting into a very noisy, crowded market, into a space that's relatively uncovered by a lot of other products and services. And to do it at a price point that works for the small and mid market is pretty cool. And going back to what I said in the beginning, my passion is really about helping small and mid-sized companies. And, I think it's, in some ways incredibly frustrating that, you can have the large banks and the large government contractors can spend, $500 million to $1 billion a year on security and still not be completely secure. And everybody else is just told, like, if you can't spend a lot of money on security, you're being irresponsible. And I think that's the wrong thing to do. It's up to us technologists to solve this problem for small and mid-sized companies in creative ways. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point this out, and because I think that what Vince is doing and what Dark-Cubed is doing generally is available out there. There are companies doing this kind of work to make it less onerous on you. Yep. And I know I've talked in the last 2 episodes about some of the tools that are out there. Dark-Cubed is among those that I think is really important for us to be able to reduce the burden on us while still staying affordable and making it possible for us all to basically stay in that space. And so with that, I wanted to, thank you, Vince, for joining me here
My pleasure.
On the show. And where can people keep up to date with Dark-Cubed and with you?
Yeah, so we're on, our website is darkcube.com. I'm also on Twitter at Vince Crisler, and we're at Dark-Cube Cyber on Twitter. So come follow us, join us, connect with me on LinkedIn. I always encourage folks to go on LinkedIn. There aren't many Vince Crislers out there. Connect with me. I'd love to connect with you. If you need help or if you have a question, I'm happy to answer them. Again, this is going back to brand and the same discussion we had with you all around how do you manage your brand and your reputation. What I'm passionate about is helping you all do cybersecurity better, whether or not my product's involved at all. I want to help you. And so if you have questions or comments or things that you need information to, I'm happy to point you to the right way.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.
That was Vince Crisler, CEO of Dark Cubed, and I just want to just close with a couple of announcements that I have for you all. And I really appreciate you sticking around for the conversation and all that fun stuff. And so just a couple of quick things. Next week, we go back to our regularly scheduled content. And so I see that there are some questions in the chat panel. We're running out of time, so I apologize for those. I will certainly answer those questions post-recording. But there are 2 episodes coming out next week, one on Monday, and then another one I will be releasing not going live. So just everybody is aware that I'm going live Monday as normally at 11 a.m. Eastern US time, and then I will be putting out another episode because there was a lot of news that happened in October, and I wasn't able to do that because we were doing the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month content. Second is 11/5. I'm doing a webinar called Podcast Marketing Changes You Need to Know. And so that'll be on November 5th. And so you can check that out by going to w3cinc.com/events. So w3cinc.com/events. And if you scroll down, you'll see the Eventbrite embed that will show up, and you can go ahead and register for the webinar there. And then last but not least, if you are not already a member of Web and Beyond community, you can go ahead and join Web and Beyond community. That is our digital community for small business owners. And so you can go ahead to make sure you put in the www.webandbeyond.community, and you can join us there in the community. And so with that, we've come to the end of our time together this week. If you've enjoyed the live stream and you're watching on YouTube or wherever else, feel free to hit the thumbs up icon. That helps us make new small business friends. And so thank you for doing that. If you have a question or a comment, you know that I'm always on Twitter. You can leave that comment or question. You can tweet at us at W3 W3 Consulting, and then you can join us, of course, here every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern, unless we otherwise note. Thank you so much for spending this Web and Beyond live with me with this cybersecurity theme and sticking with me all month on these topics. Again, I'm Ray Sidney Smith, President of W3 Consulting and Managing Director of W3C Web Services. Have a great week marketing, a great week ahead marketing on the Web and Beyond. Take care, everybody.